I read some really good books in 2021 and I read some really bad books in 2021, and this is how it went. I don't have an intro, so we're just gonna get into it. I have my year in books 2021 pulled up and we're just gonna go through my stats. Now, I do work full-time and I go to school full-time, so I really was only reading between like May and August, so unfortunately I was a little slacking. I didn't log. I think about 4 books are missing from this out of the 20 that I have to share with you. But we're gonna go over my Goodreads stats, talk about my goals for 2022, and we'll just kind of get into it. So my year in books. Read 6,738 pages over the 20 books that I logged on my Goodreads, which honestly, for only reading for about 4.5 months out of the year, like, I'm pretty impressed with myself. I do want to make it a really big point in my life to read more in 2022, so I hope I can make that a successful habit implemented into my daily life for this year, because I really do want to read more. It's definitely that escapism that everyone needs right now. So my shortest and longest books, my shortest being Double Indemnity and my longest being A Court of Wings and Ruin. My average book length in 2021 was 336 pages, which is pretty true. It's about average. I try to stick around the 300 mark. I feel like anything really over 400 pages, just make a separate book.
It's not that hard. Just make that a different book.
Please and thank you. Sequels are recommended. So then we have my most popular and least popular books, which was Acotar, the first one, so Court of Thorns and Roses, which was shelved by 1.7 million people. My least popular book was Cryptid Hunters. I will talk about this book later. I absolutely adore this book. If anyone wants to know how this filming is going, my husband just texted me and asked me if I was crying. So clearly he thinks I'm having a great time. Back to this book review. My average rating for 2021 was 3.5 stars, which is average. So moving on. My highest rated book I read in 2021 on Goodreads was A Court of Mist and Fury. No one's shocked. That book was pretty good. My first review of the year was We Were Liars. It was the first book I read in 2021, and I thought the book was good. However, I guessed it by the beginning of part 4, so 3 stars. My last review of the year was Neon Gods by Katie Roberts, which I really did enjoy that book. I definitely say give it a read. I gave it 4 stars. So out of the whole challenge, I logged 20 books. I aimed to read 25. Obviously I missed it, but you know, people don't always meet their goals, and that's okay. I'm still worthy. So now I want to go through just like a quick recap of every book that I did read this year, in order of when I read them. And obviously this won't take very long because there's only 20 of them. So the first book that I read in 2021 was We Were Liars. I gave this book 3 stars. I thought it was like a pretty okay read. Unfortunately, I did guess the ending by the beginning of the 4th part of the book. So once I kind of read what had happened, I was like, oh. So I was right. Like, it just kind of fell flat for me personally because I had guessed it, so I digress. The second book that I read was actually a book of poems called The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one. I read both The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one and The Princess Saves Herself in this one, which are both by Amanda Lovelace. I gave The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one 2 stars. I didn't really connect with it, and then I just kind of put the pieces together that like poetry really wasn't for me. I gave The Princess Saves Herself in this one 3 stars. It was a little better, but again, I just don't think poetry is my thing. And because of that, what did I do? I read another poetry book, Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. I'm really not sure how you say that name. I apologize in advance. So I read Milk and Honey. I gave this book 2 stars. Again, poetry. Moving on. The next book that I read was All of the Bright Places, and I will summarize this book for you based on my summary that I gave it, which was, I'm angry. This book will frustrate you in a loving,
why are you doing this to me
sort of way, and you've been warned, which I think is fairly accurate for this book. I gave it a 3 stars. Read it at your own risk. Thank you. The next book that I read in 2021 was Heartless by Marissa Meyer. I almost DNF'd this book. I did not connect with it. I gave it 2 stars, and this book was a big waste of my time. So there's that. The next book that I read was A Song of Achilles. Listen, this book is so hyped up. Everyone loves this book. I will spare you the fangirling for it, but I will tell you what this book did to me in 2 very short sentences. This book ripped my heart out of my chest, turned it upside down, and shoved it back in. And that is this book. Do with that what you will. The next book that I read was actually Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. So I found myself in a reading slump at one point. I was like, I really didn't know what I wanted to read next. I wasn't really connecting with any synopses. And I actually watched Noelle Gallagher's video of like books to get you out of a reading slump. And this was one that she had like highly recommended. And I was like, okay girl, I believe you. I'll give it a go. And
she was right.
Listen to her. She knows what she's talking about. It really did. It dragged me right out of my reading slump. I had such a good time. It's so fast-paced. I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I wish I could give it a 4.5 because it deserves that extra half a star. I loved it so much that I was like, oh, I just read this amazing book. I loved it so much. I'm going to go and watch the movie.
The movie was absolute garbage.
This movie was like a dumpster fire if you put that dumpster that's already on fire inside of another dumpster that's on fire. I hated it. It was terrible. Do not recommend the movie. They change all of the good parts about the book. Literally everything about the book that stands out, at least in my mind, they like didn't even put in the movie, and I'm like,
what's the point?
So anyway, read the book, great time. Don't watch the movie. Save yourself the pain. The next books that I read in 2021 was the Acotar series. Listen, you all know what you need to know about this trilogy. It's great, it's exciting. The one downside to the Acotar series is Sarah J. Maas's writing gets
a wee bit redundant at some points.
So I could kind of tell when those points in the book were happening, and I was like, okay, skip. So I kind of just skimmed through the pages of stuff where I was like, I'm reading this for a second time, let's move on, let's keep it pushing. But other than that, I really love this trilogy. I gave each of the book 4 stars. I would reread the Acotar Trilogy. I have not read the 4th book. I'm waiting for it to finish, like for that trilogy to finish, because I need answers, and I would rather not know than to partially know. So I'm waiting for that to come out. But overall, I had a really good experience with the trilogy. I think it's worth a read. It's really good escapism. But the books, honestly, each could be about 150 pages lighter than what they are, but that's just my opinion. The next book that I read was A Court of Frost and Starlight. So that is like an interim book, more of like a novella. I gave that book 2 stars. It literally added nothing to the plot. I did not like it. Do not recommend it. Just skip over it. Save yourself the time. Totally not worth it. And it was weird. So the next book that I read in 2021 was The Devil All the Time by Donald Ray Pollock. So listen, this is probably my biggest disappointment of 2021. I love a good horror book. I love a good mystery. I love a good murder mystery. I love, you know, gory books. I can dig it all. But listen, everyone said that this book was super good, and they're like, oh, well, you know, the movie's coming out, or the movie had just come out at the time I was going to read it. And I was like, oh, I'll read it and then watch the movie. This book was so bad, I didn't even want to watch the movie. I gave this book 2 stars. I was told that this book was a thriller horror, and it really wasn't. Every time that something happened in the book, I was like, oh, I bet you this is gonna happen next, and then it did. It left no mystery to me. I just kind of found it extremely predictable. I'll link my Goodreads review, honestly, 2 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in 2021 was Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. I gave this book 3 stars. I enjoyed the writing style of this book. I thought it was really well put together. Hi, Editing Taila here. So I am completely missing a clip from earlier when I filmed this video. My review for Desperate Measures by Katie Roberts has completely disappeared. I gave that book a 4 out of 5 stars, and it for some reason cut half of my review out for Double Indemnity, which is also a really great book. I'm not sure what happened to the clip. It is just
gone with the wind.
I have no idea. So sorry to butt in. We will return to our
regular scheduling program.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what happened, so sorry about that. And then the very last book that I read in 2021 was Neon Gods by Katie Robert, who was also the author of Desperate Measures, so I do really like her writing style. I know that she has more books coming out in the Wicked Villain series and with the Neon Gods series. This is a Hades and Persephone retelling. I absolutely adored this book. I gave it 4 stars. I think it's totally worth a read.
Got a little spice.
A romance thrown in there for you, so you really can't go wrong. And yeah, that's pretty much my books of 2021. Those are the ones that I got around reading that I actually logged on my Goodreads. There were a couple other books that I read throughout the year, like I read John Green's
The Anthropocene Review,
which I really enjoyed. That was a 5-star read for me. I actually have one of the signed copies. This is really like a holy grail for me. I actually bought the digital copy of this book to read it. I want to keep this in like the best condition that I possibly can. I hold this like very near and dear to my heart because I have been such a fan of John Green for literally as long as I remember. I love all of his books. I can't think of a single one that I don't like. I am pretty sure I've read everything he's published twice, if not more. The first time I read The Fault in Our Stars, I literally like cried in the shower for 30 minutes. Definitely give this book a read if you haven't. Definitely one of my favorite authors of all time. I absolutely love John Green. So my goal for 2022 is to read 45 books. So far I've already read 3 for this year. I will talk about them in my January wrap up. So you guys either can stalk my Goodreads to find out what I've read or just wait for my wrap up. But I really do want to make it a point to read more in 2022 just because it's definitely an escapism point for me. I always feel a lot more calm when I read a book, and it definitely takes me out of like, you know, just the everyday monotony of what people go through being in school full time and working full time. It definitely gets really stressful. I would definitely say if you can afford to take the time, even if it's just 20-30 minutes before bed, just read, just relax, like everything will be okay. And I do plan on reading 45 books this year, so I do hope to see you all in my wrap-ups for January and the months after that, and I hope you have enjoyed what I read in 2021. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Howdy, fancy seeing you here. I realized after watching the rest of my footage, I'm also missing the review for Cryptid Hunters and for The Hating Game. The Cryptid Hunters book was a 4.5-star read for me, and The Hating Game was a 5-star read for me. I absolutely adore these books. So Cryptid Hunters I actually read in middle school. I absolutely adored this book. I thought, oh my god, literally can't get any better than this. I was so obsessed with this book the same way that my friends were obsessed with Harry Potter at the time. Like, that was my holy grail. And I was cleaning out my childhood home and I found a copy of it like way back in the back of my closet, and I was like, holy crap, I'm totally gonna read this again. And I loved it just as much as an adult as I did when I was a kid. It is such a fun read. It's such an easy read, and it just keeps you wrapped up in the story. There's a really good plot twist in the book. So I think if you're just up for a good time, this book is for you. I absolutely adored it. It's actually part of a trilogy. There is a second and third book that I also think are worth the read. I enjoyed them. Those would be Tentacles and Chupacabra. So the whole trilogy really is about a brother and sister who their family are like famous like cryptid hunters. So cryptids being animals that people don't think exist. So that would be like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, things like that. But they actually wind up finding some, and it's just super cool. And it is a fiction book, so it is like kind of on the fantasy side, but totally worth the read. It is just such a good book to escape into. And then The Hating Game, oh my goodness, The Hating Game. I absolutely love this book. I think once I found out that Lucy Hale was playing Lucy Hutton from the book, I was so beyond thrilled. She was just like the perfect person to cast. When I visualize Lucy Hutton up here, I see Lucy Hale. So when I found out that she was actually going to play Lucy Hutton in the movie, I was just over the moon. I give that book a 5 stars. It literally holds such a good place in my heart. I read this book because Noelle Gallagher, it's one of her favorite books. She actually got a tattoo. It's so cute. She got a little strawberry, which if you've read it, you would know. Literally 5 out of 5 stars, 10 out of 10 read. Like, you've got to do it. So sorry again to just like
Hop in here.
but I don't know what happened to that clip. So thanks for watching.